Shalom, and welcome to another class on our journey towards exploring the Bible. And we are currently in the second book of Samuel, of Shmuel, in the 9th chapter. We are really reaching a high point in King David's career, even though it's at the beginning. But at the beginning, he accomplishes the most that he sets out to accomplish, which is to unite the kingdom, which is to ask God and have God guide him and guide the people. He's writing his Psalms. He's teaching the nation. He's building a family. He conquers Jerusalem, Jebus, right? He makes the city of David. He even, we've mentioned already, tries to build a temple. At least he makes the preparations for his son who's going to build the temple. And all of this he has accomplished in a very short period of time. And he also brings the ark, the holy ark, to Jerusalem. So, and as we'll see now, he's also a fierce warrior, and he helps Israel defeat all the enemies. Now, I'm just setting this up because at some point we're going to reach chapter 11. And in chapter 11, things go downhill a little bit, reminding us that David is indeed a human and has faults. So we will get there when we get there. But right now we're going to do chapters 9 and 10, which is still part of the meteoric rise of King David. And he always, throughout his tenure, always was cognizant of the previous king, the respect that was due to King Saul. And despite the fact that King Saul wanted to kill him, it nevertheless was very important to King David to respect the monarchy, respect the anointed one and his family. And even, especially now, where Saul is dead, Jonathan's dead. Avner, the great general who might have been a political threat, is dead. There's no one left. Ishbosheth is dead. David, by all rights, should be able to move on and to gloat. And in chapter 9, David does the exact opposite, which is just amazing. He turns to, I guess, his ministers, and he says to them, "Is there anyone left in the house of Saul with whom I can do kindness for the sake of Jonathan? Ve'aseh imo chesed ba'avor Yehonatan." So Jonathan is still on his mind. Trying to maintain a legacy for Jonathan or for the house of Saul is still on his mind. And it's remarkable. Why does he care so much? And yet he does. And he's told that, yes, the house of Saul always had this one servant named Tziva. So maybe he knows. So they brought Tziva. He was called to the king's palace, and he came to him and he said, "Are you Tziva?" He said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Tziva, tell me, is there anyone left in the house of Saul?" Now, in ancient times, there was a reason that a new king wants to know if anyone is left from the house of the old king. What's the reason? It's going to kill them, right? I mean, that's the way you maintain your sole rights, that there's no one else who can ascend the throne because they don't have a legal, they're not heirs. But nevertheless, Tziva tells King David, "You know what? Yonatan had another son." Now they all thought that Yonatan's sons were killed and there was no one left. But in fact, Yonatan had another son. And this son was crippled. Nechei raglayim. I guess because at an early age he lost the ability to walk, so then he was never really part of the entourage and the warriors and he was this Nebuch, this kid, this boy who was left in the house. So King David says, where is he? So Tziva says, once again, without any concern, he didn't think that David was going to go kill him. He says he's in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel from Lodabar. David says, bring me him from this house. The son's name is Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth comes, who's the son of Jonathan. The son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, comes to David and he falls on his face and he bows down, which once again reflects that, his grandfather was vying with David for the throne, but his father was a close, lifelong friend of the king. So where do Mephibosheth's allegiance lie? And the answer is it lies with his father and lies with King David. And therefore he bows down. He says, I am here, I am your servant. David says to him in verse 7, fear not, for I am going to do kindness because of your father. And I am going to give you everything that you deserve, and you will eat at my table at all times. Now, it stands to reason that Mephibosheth, who couldn't work, who was unable to provide, probably and didn't receive any of the land or the wealth from his father who was killed in the battle, and everyone took advantage of him, and comes along David and said, I will take care of you because of your father. Now, Mephibosheth was shocked. He didn't understand. In verse 8, he says, he bows down and he says, why are you showing me any recognition? I'm like a dead dog. I'm useless and I'm insignificant. So why would you care? David doesn't answer. I think it was a rhetorical question. But in verse 9, the king calls Tziva, this slave or servant of Saul, who probably had his own ambitions. As we'll learn, he had a big family. And he says to Tziva, everything that belonged to Saul and his entire family goes to Mephibosheth. And you will now serve and work the land, you and your children and your servants, to make sure that Mephibosheth has a salary or a stipend or food that he needs in order to live a good life. And he'll always eat at my table, David says, like one of the sons of the king. So David basically adopts Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth himself had a son named Micha. And Mephibosheth stayed in Jerusalem and ate at the king's table all of his life. We'll find out that the king doesn't exactly stay at the king's table. There's going to be a story about that. But I think this chapter is teaching us that David never forgot, that David always had a gratitude, that David was always willing to go that extra mile for even his I wouldn't say enemies, I would just say the people who with whom he had a challenging relationship. Nevertheless, his grandson, Saul's grandson, would sit by his table. Chapter 10. That was the kindness of David. Now we're going to talk about the the warrior, King David, and the political strategist. Sometime after, the king of Ammon died, and his son Hanun succeeds him as king. I think the father's name was Nachash. And David remembered that Nachash was very kind to him. So David calls, it says to himself, or says to his people in his kingdom, I am going to show kindness or show favor, gratitude to the son because of how the father treated me. And he sent messengers to console, to comfort the son upon the loss of the father. So the Ammonite officials they said, do you think David is really honoring your father just because he sent you men with condolences? He obviously sent men to spy out the city and to try to overthrow it. So, a king always has people whispering in his ear, and they are his advisors, and they have their own agendas. And this agenda was to say that David is not here out of kindness of his heart, but he's ready to conquer Ammon. Well, Hanun took the advice mistakenly of his advisors, and he decided to humiliate the messengers of David. He clips off a side of their beards and cuts away half of their garments all the way to the buttocks. This is the greatest, humiliation. You send messengers; they must have brought foods or words of condolences, and they're returned with half of a beard. That's a big, big shame. So David finds out about it, and he sees that they're so embarrassed. And he says, stay in Jericho until your beard grows back, and then you can come back. So I don't want you to be so embarrassed. Now, when the people of Ammon saw that David was shocked and angered, so they realized, he's going to attack, and we got to defend ourselves. And they didn't have enough men to defend themselves. So what do? They hired. That's what you do. You hired mercenaries, and these mercenaries were from Aram Tzova, which is somewhere in Syria. They hired 20,000 soldiers, and the king Macha another 1,000, and another 12,000 men from Tov. So that's a big army, because they knew that David was coming after him, or Yoav, David's general, was coming after them. David hears this in verse 7, sends Yoav and all of the heroes. And then in verse 8, they go out to battle. And they had different, they had basically different parts of their army were in different, one came around. So there was a front battle and a back battle, okay? And Yoav sees this and understands that this is a very dangerous situation. So what does he do? He prepares one group to go fight in the north, and he says to another group, and you should go fight in the south. Another turn around, because they're going to come and attack our flank. And he says, and who does he put in charge of the second division? His brother Avishai. I'm telling you, these Tzruyas are all amazing generals, right? There's Yoav, and there's Avishai, and there was Asael, and they were all very, very powerful And Avishai is in the rear, and Yoav is in the front. And Yoav says to Avishai, listen, turn around occasionally, and I will as well. And if you see that you're easily defeating, come and help me, and vice versa. I will come and help you out. And then he says in verse 12, Chazak v'nit chazak ba'ad ameinu u'ba'ad arei Eloheinu v'Hashem yaseh tov beinam. This is perhaps the source for where we always say Chazak, Chazak v'nit chazek. Here it means be strong and be strengthened, fighting on behalf of our nation and fighting on behalf of the cities of God. And God will certainly do what's right in our eyes, in his eyes. And Yoav goes and attacks, and the enemy flees. And the other enemy from the back saw that they were half an army immediately, so they also they fled before Avishai and withdrew into the city. So it seems to be a success. When the Arameans saw that they'd been defeated by Israel, they regrouped their forces, and Hadadezer sent his, another general and another army. Vayasov et kol Yisrael vayavor et hayarden vayavor chelama vayechu aram likrat David vayilachamu imo. So David sends his armies. David goes and fights, goes into battle, and David succeeds in routing out the enemies. And in verse 18, Aram runs away from David, and David destroyed 700 Aramean charioteers and 40,000 horsemen, and struck down Shavach, Hadadezer's army commander, who died there. And when all the vassal kings of Hadadezer saw that they had been rooted by Israel, they submitted to Israel, and they paid him tribute. And the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. So this is the conclusion of the successful military power of David through Yoav, through Avishai, with God's help, not accepting, any humiliation from the surrounding nations, but showing real power and making sure that their borders are safe. This now concludes, and we'll stop for this short class. This concludes, really, as I said, the how shall I put it? The positive ideal King David, and from the next chapter, who suffered when he was running away from Saul and lost his family or didn't, have a connection with him. But as king, he succeeded. Whereas something happens in the next chapter. In the next chapter, we meet another woman, and perhaps this is the Achilles heel of King David, is his thirst for a beautiful woman. He takes a lot of them, and the ones that he takes, the Torah already says you have to be careful to not take too many wives. He takes, he has 5 or 6 wives and a whole bunch of children so far, but that's only when you take them in an appropriate way. What happens if you take them in an inappropriate or immoral way? And that is the subject of our next class, the story of David and Bathsheba. Thank you very much. and have a good week. And we will meet again for the drama to continue the story of King David.